Okay. Okay, so now we are recording, if that's okay with everybody. There are some parts of this that will be active sharing. And so if anybody, I want everybody to be able to share and feel open to being able to do that. So if anybody wants privacy around sharing with this collective that's here now, which is all women right now, um, you can just let me know and I'll pause the recording if you don't want it shared. The purpose of recording the sanctuary is to put it on YouTube for other people who are not able to come and for people to get some experience from the sessions. So absolutely respect your willingness to share and also your willingness, your desire to have privacy if you want that. So that's great. So I have worked with end of life. I was a bone marrow transplant nurse for a long time, and so I've been around death my entire life. And I'll tell a little story about my first experience with grief as I know it, as far as a death. We'll also learn there are many other types of grief that we are experiencing on this planet now, and also what's happening with our our Western civilization and the society and culture around how it's not really okay to be open and to be sharing feelings of grief in our society in general. And I would say in general because I think we're making an effort in pockets across the United States to do a better job, not only exploring but celebrating and honoring grief in all its forms. So we will do some of that as well. I'm going to admit Dennis. Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about today. I think I found a lot of people in my life that have a hard time talking about grief. I certified as a death doula several months ago and have some fun dinner cards and some different ways that we can open up that conversation, even about having healthcare directives. I am almost 63 years old. I'll be 63 this month. And I think my population, my age group, is a group that hopefully would be open to talking about healthcare directives and how do they want to live the rest of their life, and how do you want your ceremony to be, and all of those things. And what I have found is just the opposite. It is like a total bummer to talk about. And a lot of people, even in my age group and older, I have a lot of friends that are in their 70s. They just don't want to talk about it. They're trying so hard to keep their mood elevated and to keep, in this current world, to keep things fairly positive, that it's a very tough thing to want to talk about. So I appreciate all of you being on, and I will do a couple of little things around grief and talking about it. And hopefully we can kind of spread the wealth around that. It's really a beautiful thing if we can metabolize and can honor what we have embodied as far as the losses in our life. And, we'll just explore that a little bit. Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about today. I don't know what's happening. Trying to switch my pages. That's what I get for doing some fancy. Okay, so if I can offer to all of you, a lot of you are not on video anymore, and that's perfectly fine. Normally on a Sunday morning, I can barely get myself out of bed and have a cup of coffee, so I don't want to show myself on a Sunday morning. But what I'd like to ask everybody to do is to kind of get yourself in a comfortable position. It looks like most of you are sitting. I want to do a little bit of a visualization with you because I just mentioned Western civilization, how we don't really hold space for having these open discussions about grief. And so I want to kind of do a visualization with all of you. And I'll walk you through that. Oh, good. Lauren's going outside. Beautiful. I wish I could be outside right now. So if you can just put your feet on the ground, feel yourself firmly planted. I didn't really know for a long time what it felt like to be grounded because I was always in my head. So it is a very simple thing that I had to learn in my 50s. So feet on the ground, calming place. And I'd like to invite you to shut your eyes, and I will walk you through this visualization. One nice long deep breath in. Hold it for a second. Let it out. Okay, here we go. You are walking along a wooded path and you feel grief as a heavy, opaque shroud that you have been carrying alone. The weight is immense, and its darkness obscures your path and colors everything you see. Just ahead on the path, you see a peaceful garden bathed in twilight, with a fire glowing softly in the middle of the garden. The roses surround a patch of grass that gives the impression of a circle. As you approach the circle, you notice that others are already gathered there, each carrying a similar heavy burden. Their shrouds are different colors and shapes, but the shared weight is instantly recognizable. You hesitate, unsure if you can place your heavy cloth among theirs. A gentle figure or a kind voice from the circle encourages you to come in. You find an open spot and sit down, cautiously laying your grief shroud on the floor in front of you. Other members of the circle do the same, their bundles creating a rich and varied tapestry in the center. The light in the garden grows brighter as each person adds their bundle. You realize that by joining, you have not added to their burdens. Instead, your presence has strengthened the collective light. The individual weight of your grief, while still present, no longer feels singular and overwhelming. As the circle begins, imagine a gentle, warm rain starting to fall from the ceiling. It is a cleansing rain made of empathy and shared understanding. As the drops touch the shrouds, the fabric begins to soften and release its hold. As your grief shroud softens, you begin to unfurl, and it lets its contents emerge. What was a shapeless, heavy mass now takes on form, perhaps sharp, jagged stones of anger, a knotted rope of guilt, or a delicate glass bird of bittersweet memories. As you place each item in the center, you realize you are not alone. Others in the circle are quietly doing the same, creating a mosaic of shared sorrow. There is no judgment here, only the silent, powerful act of being witnessed. You may not have the words to describe every piece, but your fellow circle members see the weight you have carried, and you in turn see theirs. After the sharing, the rain of empathy becomes a soft, warm mist that nourishes the center. You reach out and pick up some of the softened pieces from your grief bundle. They are no longer sharp or heavy. You can carry these newly softened memories with more tenderness, and they no longer threaten to break you. You decide which pieces of your grief you can leave in the center, trusting that the collective energy of the circle will continue to process them. This is not about forgetting, but about entrusting your pain to a space of shared humanity. You rise from the circle feeling lighter with a renewed sense of connection. The grief shroud is no longer your sole burden. It is now a softened, cherished part of your history, integrated into the expanded life you will continue to build around your loss. Okay, everybody can come back, open your eyes, get back in the room. Most of you did go off a video, which is perfectly great. Okay, so the purpose of that visualization was around what used to be and what in many cultures has been lost, and especially in our society, we went away from what we call grief circles, or ways that villages and towns used to honor and celebrate any loss or grief that was in the community. So in our sort of hierarchy now, you notice a lot of social media, you notice a lot of everything is around the me, we've kind of done a shift from community being the number one focus to, or village, to we're first, and then our kind of local community is second, and then the larger world is third in how we think about what we can share and what we can't share. And So I think part of what has happened in the collective in the United States is we don't have a place anymore as far as a ceremony or ritual to celebrate and honor grief and talk about it. So for the next 45 minutes or so, this is our space, this is our circle. And I put in the chat that if you can have a pen and paper, that would be great. If you need to get up and go find that, it would be a good time to do that. We'll just be jotting down some quick question and answer around just a couple of prompts for you to think about. So if you need to go get some pen and paper, that would be great. Okay, so I'll wait for people to come back. I only have 2 people on video right now, which is okay, but if I can have some people get off mute just to say you're still with us, that would be great.
Still with you.
Okay, thank you. Okay. All right, I heard from Ellen. That's great. Okay, so thanks, Dennis. All right, and chat on the chat is fine as well. Welcome, Liz. We just finished a visualization and we're getting pen and paper. So if you need to grab pen and paper as you've just joined, that would be great. Okay, so I'm going to share a story about myself. And this is really maybe similar to some of the things that you've experienced in your lifetime. But I think it impacted me greatly for my entire life, and didn't really know until I was well into my 3rd decade of life and lost my father to cancer, that I had a lot of unmetabolized grief because I was at an age where I really didn't have tools to understand or words, language to describe what I was feeling because I was so young. So I think it impacted my life, and also probably set me on this journey to want to understand how we can unpack and kind of rid ourselves of that heavy shroud as we get older, if we haven't done that kind of real time. So I'll just talk a little short story about my first encounter with death and how I began a lifelong journey carrying a very deep sadness and fear of life that I didn't have words for. When I was 8, my favorite person in the world was driving home, and I'm not going to be able to do this without crying. It's just me. My favorite person in the world was driving home from college in her VW Bug and was in a head-on car crash the evening of December 15th, so very close to Christmas, and was placed for a short time on life support. My 20-year-old mother and her brothers and parents were the ones who had to make the horrible decision to stop life support the following morning. There was no family talk, no funeral, no viewing of her body, no evidence for me that she was really gone. And I was 8 years old. Now, as I've dealt with this my entire life, I understand Mom was grieving her only sister. She was only 29 herself and had 4 children at home. And my grandmother was wrecked forever. Once she realized Ativan and Benadryl could numb her pain, and she continued that addiction her entire life. But my young self at the time really had no tools or understanding of what death and loss was. I began to have nightmares. I became afraid to sleep. I wondered what I did wrong for her to disappear. And as the years passed and I had learned to really unpack that, I have a new appreciation for the gift that she gave. I was given time with her in her life, a very special time. She was our babysitter, and I was around her a lot more than I was around my parents. So the last and best memory I have of my 19-year-old aunt was in the bathroom, where she often put me on a sink and let me play with her Avon lipsticks. My sister and I were her dress-up dolls as she practiced learning to be the owner of her own salon. That was her dream. Because of her, I can say I've learned to embody grief as a bittersweet ache in my heart that, really never goes away. So that's my vulnerability for the day. And I yeah, I have also learned that openly crying is just part of who I am. um, all right, so grief. This is a quote from Frances Weller. I've put some resources in the chat for you. There are so many really beautiful books and resources on grief and different cultures and how different cultures celebrate grief. But this is from Francis Weller. I have found him to be very enlightening. He's very poetic in the way that he describes things. He's also works with cancer patients, especially men's groups and groups around grieving families and cancer. But he says grief is experienced by every human repeatedly and often compounded, must be metabolized. Involving every layer of our being, grief offers a powerful invitation to courageously embody and remember our most essential self and oneness with all of life. Okay, so we're going to what happened? I went all the way back to the front. Excuse me, everybody. Okay, so along the lines of Francis Weller, there are what he calls gates of grief, but also Sarah and I put the women that I've added to these descriptions because they have since added more gateways or portals of grief. And what if you haven't read up on that, what the intent is to be able to label or to identify the type of grief that you're experiencing. Most of the time, if we still do have ceremony and ritual in our lives, then we have funerals, we have ways of letting go of, or at least metabolizing our grief at the time. But there are other things that are going on in our lives that isn't just around the loss of somebody. There are now 7 gates or portals of grief. And I will just go through them really quickly. The places within ourselves that have not known love. And what that really means is, do we separate parts of ourselves and not really honor all of ourselves and kind of put it away in a little closet or a file? And in a way that's a loss of a part of yourself. And so that is now considered one of the gates of grief that you can identify. Are there parts of myself that I have not honored and dealt with the loss of? And a good example for me is somebody who's lost a limb or had cancer, lost a part of themselves, surgically or not surgically, a chronic illness, an acute illness. I had Guillain-Barré 14 years ago. And with that, I became paralyzed for 3 weeks. And I was, I'm never going to be the same. And so that was kind of a grief or a loss of the person that I used to be. Another gate is the sorrows of the world. Huge for all of us right now. We don't even have to talk about it for it to hit us at a cellular level and at a soul level. So sorrows of the world. Another one is ancestral grief. More and more is being studied about imprints on our DNA around trauma and ancestral grief that we carry through our lineage. What we expected and did not receive. That might be the idea that you have true love for your entire life, and then after 35 years, you get a divorce, and that is a huge loss, sometimes possibly bigger than a death, because it is somebody is still on the planet that you no longer, are part of. So that's an example of what we expected and did not receive. The biggest one and the number one on Francis Weller's list anyway is all that we love, we will lose. So that is obviously loved ones, but also could be something about ourselves, something that's happened that we have lost. I don't know that a lot of people would list material things as a huge grief or loss, but that's not for me to say. It's everybody's grief is their own. The ones that have been added is anticipatory grief, meaning that we never are fully present and in our joyful selves because we are constantly worried about what's coming. And I think social media has put a huge slant on that because we, even if we don't really want to engage in social media, there's just an energy around what's happening in the planet right now. And so it's a big one is anticipatory grief. Trauma is obviously there. And then the harm that I caused myself and others. And I think about that a lot as sort of residual guilt or unmetabolized guilt about things that I have done either to myself or others that I wish I could take back. So that is also a form of grief. Okay. So I'm going to have you do just a quick journaling exercise. And this is, you don't have to write it down. You can just kind of tell us how you're feeling, but just have a question about, how was proper expression of grief, sadness, or crying? You can pick any one of those modeled for you as a child. I gave you my childhood story around the modeling was silence. Everybody took on their grief and held it very closely, and really, I don't believe any of us in our family metabolized that grief from so many years ago. So if you can think of a time as a young girl, child, man, we have a man on the phone. How was that model for you as a child? And I'll give you about 5 minutes to jot some ideas down. Okay. Thank you for being on video, Lauren. It helps. Okay, everybody, if you can come back to me. Probably wasn't quite 5 minutes, but that's okay. It's enough time to get some thoughts down. All right, so I shared probably the most vulnerable thing I've ever shared because I know it makes me cry, and I know I had a big group on with me, and so to do that was hard. And I thank all of you for hanging in there with me. I would love it if somebody would share. And what I mean by proper expression is when I told my story, it was really that was the way that grief was modeled for me. Loss, sadness. We were not really allowed to verbalize our sadness. I grew up in a very sad house, but I never really understood it. And we could be happy or we could be sad. And if we were sad, we needed to be somewhere else. We needed to be alone in our room. I never taught. I was very close to my sister. She was 12 months older than me. We never until recently really talked about that loss. So that's how silent of a family I had. So who would like to go first and share anything around, how a story around your childhood and your first kind of experience with loss, and how was that modeled? It may have been that you were watching somebody else go through loss and you saw, oh, that's the way that's the way you act if you have to bury your pet, or that's the way you are allowed to behave in those circumstances. Anybody like to go first? Hey, Lauren. Thank you.
I'll go. Yeah. I mean, it feels like times were different. I'm about your age too. And if times were different back then, it's like I have a friend in England whose mother's always like, just get on with it, get on with it. And I think that's was the message, it's like there wasn't therapy. My brother walked down the stairs one day, he was 9, I was 7, said, Mom and Dad are getting a divorce. And that was the beginning of it. And I don't know if my memories are tainted, but it just kept happening and nobody ever really talked about what was going on. It's like we moved from this big house and to another state near my grandparents into a tiny apartment. And we just got on with it. I went to a we went to new schools. Suddenly dad wasn't there. Suddenly our life was completely different. I mean, I don't even know how many kids in my class had divorced parents. I wouldn't know. But it was that was the thing. It was just get on with it. And there wasn't therapy. Nobody really talked about it. I mean, if anything was talked about as what an a-hole he was, or what's he doing now, or what's he trying to get away with, or I don't know. It's like nobody really sat down and told you what was happening. You just kind of had to like go along with what was going on. So it was more like shock, like this really long period of shock. I'm sorry, my neighbor has the screechiest dog. I may turn my audio off when I'm done talking. Can you hear it?
Sounds good.
Anyway, that was my experience. And it took me years and years, like after college, to try to figure out what the hell was going on. Like I carried this depression or this loss. And it was just this untalked about, unexplored, sort of this phantom limb of loss that was just sort of supposed to be metabolized in some magical way, that nobody really addressed. So anyway, that's kind of my experience. I'm going to
Lauren,
turn my sound.
thank you
Go
for
ahead. Go
sharing.
ahead.
I have one more question for you though. When you talk about it now and you were writing it down, do you feel anywhere in your body, do you feel anything around that conversation?
Oh yeah. Everything. My throat gets activated, my heart, my soul says it's so real. And I did a lot of processing. He sort of came back to my life when I was pregnant with my second kid. So I was in my 30s. So he kind of disappeared from like age 9 to like 33. Period of life. And then we
Yeah.
have spent the last 24 years working it through, which I feel really grateful and lucky for. And now he
Mhm.
recently died. But I
Mm.
felt complete. But I mean, the whole first half of my life was just like, I'm just responding, to this loss, responding to the loss within my own marriage and not really understanding. And then, then you start to go to therapy and start to piece by piece try to figure out
Mhm.
who's responding to what part of you is responding to
Mhm.
what. I even married a guy that was the same name as my dad. So,
Mhm.
you have to piece it together later. But I think nowadays people are a little more aware about how things affect children.
Mhm.
But I don't think that was a thing back when we were kids. It
Mhm.
just wasn't a You just got on with it, right?
Mhm.
So I don't know.
Thank
Maybe
you.
that's getting
Thank you so
yeah.
much for sharing that. Um, why I asked about your body is that this is titled embodiment. This is we embody grief in many different ways, and I, for the longest time, could never understand why I would start crying at a Folgers commercial or a sad movie. But my dad and I were very like he was a very sensitive man, but he would cry along with me. So I had somebody else that was crying with me, and it was kind of normal. But we would get joked about as a family unit. But that's embodiment. You're like you don't really realize it until you start picking it apart. But you talking about that loved one or that loss or talking about anything that you in your life gives you grief, you will feel it in your body somewhere. And that is
Mhm.
embodiment of grief. And so my point is that you can talk about it and it's a beautiful story and poignant. And I just picture that little girl and not really being able to have the tools to understand what was happening. So I appreciate your story, and it's a great example of how we embody grief in our lifetimes. And there are things that we can do now. One of the references I gave all of you in chat, and it sounds like maybe people aren't able to see it. I put it in early. Was a thesis I found from the spring of 2025, and it was a woman who's getting her doctorate in psychology, but she decided to look at embodiment of grief and can we really learn to metabolize that actively by moving it through our body. And so she's a proponent of dance and movement, but she did a meta-analysis of a bunch of literature around the different sort of ways that we embody grief. So she was trying to put something tangible to almost more like some tools that you could have to not only go through that active and acute grieving process, but how to use your body as a tool to activate and metabolize grief. So I found it pretty interesting, but I'm kind of a research geek. But if you have that, you want to download that, I have the PDF of it and can shoot it over to you. Okay, who else would like to share? Thank you, Lauren, so much for being the first. It's always hard. Anybody else?
I can share. Sorry, I'm not on camera because I'm eating my breakfast right now. But it was interesting when you first asked the question. I was thinking, well, I don't think we really experienced like any deaths in the family when we were growing up. Like I guess there were pets that passed, and my mom was really great at helping us honor them in a sweet way. But I was started to think about it, and I was realized my mom went through a traumatic event which caused her to basically like abandon the family emotionally and oftentimes physically, and ended up leaving my dad. And basically she became a shell of herself.
Mm,
She went through a traumatic event. But when she left my dad, his way of grieving basically the loss of her was absolute rage and taking it out on me in particular, not as much my sister. But I think that certainly was a powerful model for me of like rejection of loss, rejection of grief, and also made me very, uh, it felt like a scary emotion or a scary thing to face. Like it was something to be avoided at all costs, especially because the repercussions of that loss was like being emotionally abused. And so I think it has certainly not felt like a safe thing to face, loss or grief. And so I've noticed through my own divorce in my adulthood, and I lost my sister to a drug overdose about 3 years ago, and I've since reconciled and had just a beautiful adult relationship with my mom. But she has early onset Alzheimer's, so I've been ambiguously grieving her for many years now, and she's now in her final days. She could go any day, any week, and just yeah, it's interesting just reflecting on the experience and the atmosphere of grief that my dad modeled has probably made it very difficult for me to face my own grief as an adult. um because it just doesn't feel safe. It feels very scary and overwhelming.
Wow, Leah, thank you for sharing that. I would ask you the same when you talk about it now, and you were able to pull out that modeling was exactly the example that was your mother. How is your body feeling right now? What's going on in your body?
I feel a lot of like tightness in my chest and my shoulders. So kind of like that freeze. Yeah.
We Martine Prechtel is one of the examples I gave you for a book. It's called The Smell of Rain on Dust. Beautiful poet, beautiful stories around his Guatemalan heritage. And but one of the things he says is that all wars on this planet are from unmetabolized grief. So especially, well, I experienced that too, not with my father, but my husband. An acceptable form of displaying sadness or deep, deep grief that is unmetabolized is rage, anger. And so if that is in your childhood, what you experience is grief is not only something painful that you don't want to experience or talk about, it can be scary. It can be something that as a child you don't want to see in anybody. And so it's a trigger really to, oh, this isn't really very safe to talk about. So I really appreciate, Leah, that you shared and were vulnerable enough to open up about that. Thank you. Who else wants to go next? I'd love to hear from everybody, even if it's a tiny, putting voice to anything that you wrote down or anything you're thinking about is extremely powerful. This is our grief circle for the next few minutes. And so I'd love to hear from everybody.
I'll go.
Okay. Thank you.
I hadn't really thought of my parents' divorce as an experience of where grief would manifest until Lauren mentioned it. I thought of my grandmother's funeral where nobody really expressed grief. I was like 5, it was the 70s. It wasn't something that, it came and went, grandma's dead, kind of, nobody really showed anything. But my mother, I think, was experiencing a lot of grief around a life that she had expected and didn't happen, and she expressed that with anger and silence, and it really permeated our home. And when my parents got divorced and my dad got custody, I found myself kind of not knowing how to react, and then I would get told that I was being sour or zinging it or being like my mom, who would shut down. And it's like a perfect picture of like ancestral trauma, like I was picking up how she had responded, and then I was being shamed for it. And now both my parents have died over the past few years, and I find myself feeling isolated. And the quote you read in the beginning with oneness is something that I really like yearn for, and and feel like I'm wired for, but I find grief so isolating, and I feel like I look through the glasses of being alone in this awful, awful heaviness. And it really can put a spell on you. It's like gaslighting.
Mm.
Um, you know, and it is from what I learned. It's not who I am, but it's hard for us to untangle, I think, sometimes, who we are from what we've learned and what's been modeled for us. So it becomes really murky and tricky. Yeah, that's my experience. My dad did MAID, which adds another level of a different kind of, it's like an extra level of grief. And there's like, you know, a kind of a feeling of abandonment that comes with, I think. MAID family members aren't, I don't think, adequately informed about what that gift that you're giving your loved one is going to look like for you when they're gone. So that just so yeah, lots of interesting tidbits. That's me.
And where do you, Ariane, feel it in your body when you're talking about this?
In my chest and my stomach, my gut. Yeah.
Heavy heart, that heavy heart saying is for real. It's yeah. Thank you for sharing. Any other brave souls out there?
I can go now if you can hear me.
Okay.
It's Sonia. When I
Hi,
was
Sonia.
a child, the biggest loss was my grandmother. I was about 8, and at the time, I think the messages I picked up. Well, first of all, children were kind of hidden from the funeral and hidden from the whole discussing what was happening. We knew that something sad happened, that we weren't going to see our grandmother, but you really weren't encouraged to talk about your feelings. Never told that was okay to feel sad. I mean, people, you witness sadness, but it was never, it was more the message like, stop feeling sorry for yourself, something you should do privately. It was, I received a message from somewhere that crying openly is almost inconsiderate to others. You're making others feel uncomfortable. And the way I was raised, that's not what you do. That you go and you experience this privately. And I can't do it because I lost my son 3 years ago to suicide, and it's hard. So it feels like a burden that I carry personally because I have to hide to express it. So I almost do a thing where there's I still go to counseling, but almost like a scheduled grieving time where I can just get the crying bit out, because it's almost like, to me, it feels tight physically. It feels in my gut and chest, but I also feel emotionally like I have lost control of myself. I can't maintain composure, and it's frustrating. And it's I get angry with myself for doing it. So that's all part of what grieving was, the messages I received as a child, and not having the tools to do it personally myself. Now I have studied a lot, and there I am also an end of life doula myself, but my own personal grief is a whole other story to when you're more objectively involved with other people. So that's my experience.
Oh, Sonia. Thank you for sharing that. One of the things that came out of some of the literature I was reading around grief was that there are some forms of emotions that are easily metabolized. They almost metabolize automatically. And that is joy, laughter, some of those fun emotions that uplift you and make you feel automatically better. And then there is grief and loss, sadness, There's an emotional wheel. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that, but I'll also link that. I found it very helpful because we were taught really there are 4 or 5 emotions that are pretty normal or easily talked about, and sadness is one of them. But when you go deeper into that, you mentioned some different words. Guilt around feeling the way that you feel, not wanting to upset anybody else. Comparative suffering is another way to look at it, where, well, this happened to me, but it's not nearly as bad as what's happening over there. And in that way, you deny yourself that power of grief. Grief tears are emotional tears, and they have been studied, and they are different in composite than any other kind of tears. So we have tears for lubrication, we have tears if something gets in our eye, but emotional tears, sadness, and even joy are actually composed of a painkiller, and I can't think of the name of it right now, but there is a painkiller in those types of tears that allow you some pain relief, emotional pain relief, but also there are toxins that are removed from your body. So it is a form of metabolizing grief. And unfortunately, what you're saying to me is all too common in our world, which is denying ourselves the ability to, in the moment, metabolize grief, sob, cry, shake, do all those things that your body will do in that sort of immediate acute grief. And that story, we really feel for you. And I feel so thankful that you were open enough to share with all of us on the call. Thank you.
Thank you.
Who would like to go next? Let's see. I know some of you probably are waiting your turn, being socially responsible. You want to follow the etiquette, but haven't heard from, well, there's Helen. Helen, you want to go next?
Yeah, I just want to say I've learned so much already this morning. The story of Ariane's story of ancestral grief from her mother. Wow, that's really amazing, and I really feel that. And from Sonia too, the open crying and how. I mean, I have a friend who's in terrible grief right now, and she wasn't invited to a dinner party because everybody knew she would cry.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was just not allowed.
Mm-hmm.
And that just, why are we so uncomfortable with crying? And also what I've learned is like how there's all these different kinds of grief,
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God. And I'm 72, so I have lots of stories around grief and lots of loss in my life. And it doesn't take much to bring it up. It's right there. It's with me. I carry it all the time. I can feel it in my body. Yeah, so that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you for sharing. Dennis, Ellen, either of you want to share real quick?
Jane, I shared a while back. I put it in the chat, but I did want to say
Okay.
that I really appreciated Ariane sort of voicing something that I hadn't really thought about in terms of, the rejection and now I'm drawing a blank on what she said. But yeah, I just felt like I resonated with some of the things she said.
Thank you, Ellen. I don't know that everybody can read your chat. Do you mind if I read it out loud?
Yeah, that's fine.
It was modeled for me that there were different standards. It was okay for everyone but me to openly cry, discuss the loss, show open low mood. Others would talk about it, cry about it, and show open sadness and grief. I was punished for expressing it. On the occasions when I was encouraged to share my grief, I would still be punished if I followed through with it, and it became a secondary source of grief. My vulnerabilities were used against me, causing more grief, so better not to acknowledge or share and make things worse for myself. As an adult, I think I was a poor model for my children. Thank you for sharing that, Ellen. That's really tough, because I think deep under there, that emotional wheel, it would be hard not to, over time, feel a sense of not having power or control over your emotions, because you have to keep them from people. And also, I can't even imagine not feeling angry about that over time. But obviously, grief is different for everybody, and that's really tough. Thank you for sharing that. Okay. Dennis, do you want to unmute and share a little bit, or you can put it in the chat or not share? It's up to you. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Dennis. All right, so we're going to move on and finish this out since we got a couple of minutes. I have another saying that came from Francis Weller. He's somehow he and Martine really stick with me, but grief keeps the heart fluid and soft, which helps make compassion possible. Grief and love are sisters woven together from the beginning. Their kinship reminds us that there is no love that does not contain loss, and no loss that is not a reminder of the love we carry for what we once held close. So that softening of the heart, when you're able to talk about it, as painful as it feels at the time, using language and getting it out either on paper or to other people, sharing in a grief circle, allows our heart to be more open and fluid and accept both the sadness and the beauty of life. What happens if we hold on to that and we don't have a tool or a way to share and to seek connectivity from other people, companionship, other people's energy? Our hearts can harden, and it's super hard to open up those cracks. And so all of you being vulnerable today on this call, sharing, is allowing, your voice to be heard and witnessed by all of us. And I really appreciate your vulnerability. Okay, I'm going to leave you with this, and we do have another two-part series. This is a two-part session on embodiment of grief and what we'll do next time. And it's not, I know Amanda sent out a message, it's not next week. Embodiment is once a month. And so on the 12th of October, I believe, we'll be back talking about how do you honor and celebrate and work through metabolize grief at this stage in our lives. What are some exercises we can do? How can we honor grief and share that with our communities? So we'll do that in the second series, or the second part. But I will leave you with a thought around, Helen, you mentioned, I've learned some things about different kinds of grief, because we kind of, like I said about comparative suffering, we kind of excuse away some of our sadness. What right do we have to be sad about something that seems so normal or so small in comparison to what's happening in the world, what's happening in our, on our planet, in the United States even. So we easily excuse away or bury it because we don't think it's important enough, or we've been taught that it's not important. So if you're into journaling, or just think about it, I'm going to plant a seed for you, for all of you that will be on next time. We will start with a journal prompt, which is "My heart aches for." And that can be a million things. And there is some benefit to you and your body just writing down those simple words over the next few weeks of, what today is my heart aching for? And that will be your homework assignment. So part 2, honoring grief, that's coming up in October. In the meantime, Buena Vida, look for there's some messages that came out from Amanda around the retreats that are going on in Joshua Tree. The next one is next week. It's full. And then there are a few more in September and October that have 1 or 2 slots left. So if you know somebody that would benefit or you want to come back, that's available to all of you. Okay. Any last parting words from anybody? Want to give you all a chance to say anything you want before we close out?
Thank you,
Anybody?
Jane.
You're welcome, Lauren. Beautiful to see you again.
Me too. I've got to run. So thank you everybody for sharing your hearts, and maybe we'll see you next time.
Thank you. Anybody else? I'll check chat real quick, or anybody else, or we'll just close out, but I'll look at chat real quick. Great. Thank you all. And with that, we'll close out this Sunday session. Bye, everybody.